Welcome to episode 8 of Imagine, your welcome distraction for the evening, where we explore the role technology plays in defining new forms of creativity. I'm excited for tonight's talk on architecture, art, and environments. Our first speaker is Yara. She's a French Lebanese designer working at the intersection of architecture, video games, and immersive technologies. She's a faculty at UCLA AUD and the creative director of Folly Feast Lab, co-founded with Vivian El Mati. Through world building and storytelling, they design experimental video games around queer identity and technology. They were semifinalists for AWE and are currently working on a new game through MIT ODL and ONX Onassis. Thanks for joining us tonight, Yara. Ooh, all
Thank you
right, take it
for
away.
having me. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm always excited to be in conversation with all of you. And I'll share my screen and make sure I share sound. And yeah, so my name is Yara. Beautiful introduction by Caco. And my background is in architecture and in like I'm a licensed architect, and I discovered at some point immersive and interactive technologies, and this is how I turned all my career into working with immersive and interactive experiences. And that could mean many things. So it could mean working with designing software, designing virtual reality experiences, designing augmented reality experiences or mixed reality, working with the relationship between physical space and digital worlds, and seeing how we can inhabit these two, but also working through game engine and through designing video games. And I kind of want to show you a bit of what we do in our studio, but also what I do with my student, because I think it's always interesting to see how, what you do in the world bleeds into what you learn in school. And by the way, everything that I'm presenting is on my website. So it's my name, the website. So feel free to go and check it out. And this is one of the latest exhibition we had. It was during the summer, and we showed our a VR piece that we did about identity and finding a sense of belonging in a new city. For us, it was a personal story about landing in Los Angeles and finding a way of identifying and understanding the city through a personal lens of culture and identity. And this is just to show you a bit how it was exhibited. And you can go later on my website and check it out. It's here. It's quite long, so I will just show like a little part of it. But we really use emerging and new technologies of new media to express and design all of these digital worlds. Like you can see here, it's a seamless mix of different techniques and 3D point cloud and different way of representing 3D space. And this is a VR piece, so I usually dislike showing it on a screen because it's so different in the headset. And just because Caco mentioned it, the AWE semifinalist, this is a project where we worked on understanding what the deep sea would look like. So this project has really a strong length in climate's future and thinking about, what do we do to the world we inhabit, and maybe today more than any other day, like really thinking about our future on this planet and what we're doing to the existing systems. And this is a world that you inhabit a VR deep sea mining colony, and you try to understand what happens, what kind of system exists there. And I'll just play the trailer while I speak over. Experience the wonders of the abyss. Embody deep sea creatures, develop empathy, and initiate care for our ocean's depth with the Deep Sea Chronicles Stories from the Abyss, VR. The deep sea is an important part of the global carbon cycle, and any disruption to this ecosystem could have unintended consequences for the rest of the planet. The UN's Convention on the Law of the Sea considers the deep sea floor to be the common heritage of mankind. Yet, it is easy to forget about it and its many wonders since we never see it. The Deep Sea Chronicles Stories from the Abyss visualizes the cause and impact of climate change on the deep sea floor bed. We use virtual reality to embody another species, initiate care through empathy with our deepest ocean life, while learning about the life of each of the deep sea creatures. You also learn about the climate threats to that environment through deep sea mining. VR is the only way to experience this ecosystem in order to generate care and action. Experience the deep sea wonder through an immersive interactive adventure that allows you to explore the mysteries of the mesmerizing deep sea creatures and world and learn about its inhabitants. There's no other way to explore the mysteries of our deepest and darkest waters. And since we live in a culture deeply imbued with images, interaction, and entertainment, that visualizing these worlds through XR is the only way to see them in order to care for them. We need to see in order to care, in order to act, in order to make changes. Our solution harnesses XR. I'm not going to continue everything, but you get it. So we design experiences and environment to talk about either identity issue or cultural issue or climate issues and sustainability. And this is really what we do in our practice. And this is another project. Last summer, we were in the south of France and we were working with the Extended Reality Center for Research and Creative Outcome. And we worked on designing an app for the city of Cannes in the south of France and French Riviera. And it's really talking about the flora of the region and how you make people and tourists aware of how fragile that flora is. And you can see some augmented reality. So this is screenshots from the app where you can visit all of these different points. And it works a bit like Pokemon Go. So it's a game where you're supposed to like capture these flowers and take pictures and learn about them. And it also, so you can see here, you can see the augmented flower, and this is the app. So you have the map and you have this little icon, and it goes all over the French Riviera, and it's a collection of data of how to inhabit and spatialize a herbarium, which is usually a large data set like an archive or a library that is hard to access. So we developed this app, and we also did a version of it, maybe more punkish, for the CalArts here in California, where also you could go on campus and you could capture these plants and collect their cards, which you can see here. And once you collect all the cards, you win the game. So this is a bit what we do in our practice. And currently, as Caco said, but I won't be showing any of it, we're working on a new game and we're really, really excited. It's a longer game. And yeah, we're really excited about the outcome. And hopefully in the next lecture, I would be able to share more about it. But what I wanted to show you is some of the ways the type of work I do leaks into my teaching at UCLA. So I teach in the graduate program in the School of Art and Architecture. In the architecture department, I'm a full-time faculty there, design faculty. And this is one of the tech seminar I ran a few months ago where students were tasked to design these huge physical models. Maybe Matt was here for the final, but we did this huge physical model, and the idea was to use them as board games. So we wanted to use them and use augmented reality to project onto them a little player. So what you see moving around in blue, it's a little agent, and I'll play the video while I talk over it, but it's the idea that we use architectural representation, like the axonomet point of view, and to overlay on top of it a little agent, like a platformer game. So the same way little Mario chases after Princess Peach, our little agent is chasing around. You can see in pink here, chasing around, trying to get to the top of the game. And there's 8 levels, as you can see, 8 different figures on the screen. I'm going to skip to a bit later where and you have different animation, and every world has a different story and a different narrative. Because in our work, we really focus on nonlinear narrative. We're really interested in how spatial design, like from an architectural point of view, can help us discover new ways of designing narratives. So we are thinking that nonlinear narrative could come from the way we design spaces. And we also bring in our culture and our background, which is a non-Western education. And we hope that through these lenses, we're able to engender new ways of creating interactive and immersive experience through new ways of designing narratives and digital space. So here you can see all of them animated. This one has a chicken that is going around. This one is a vertical farm. This is all, of course, only possible with the amazing students we have at UCLA. And everything has a thematic, and you can see this little agent moving around and turning things on and off. And I'll show you a bit the mood of what doing a review like this looks like. So we're all behind our screen with joysticks, trying to move things around and to get through through that game, so we're able to move on to the next level. So you can see here she's helping whoever's playing the game to get to the other level by showing her a secret pathway. So what you see is the physical model, and then the digital element is only the particle and that little agent. And you can see these huge model that work on pedestal and are, you know, perfectly aligned with the camera, so you can have that perfect seamless gameplay over it. So it's really a mix of how can we think about designing new spaces as architects. You know, we're a designer of spaces, virtual, physical, digital, and how that way of learning about using game engine and using game mechanics and things from the world of video games and digital world, you could bring all of that within an architecture education, and you know, it would benefit both sides. So the architects learn from the game designer, and the game designer learn from the spatial thinking of the architects. So hopefully resulting in very, you know, novel, interesting ways of designing spaces and designing interactive games. Before I jump to here, so there's a lot of these. There's a lot of platformer game where we design vertical platform where you're able to scroll around the screen and yeah, and try to get to the end. And you can see all of these world that different students have created. I'll let you, you know, travel through the website and enjoy that. But the last thing I want to show is Santa Monica. So it's a studio that I did last fall, so maybe 12 months ago. And we used the site of Santa Monica, which is a part of town here in LA. And let me show you here. So if we look at this, you can see that this is the site. So it's an urban block in Santa Monica. And the idea was to understand how many agents, how many actors are part of a decision on how to build a building in a certain part of town. And it was really about participatory design and participatory play. So what you see here is the map of the site. And what you see here is the 3D game board. So the 3D model that acts as a game board for us. And I'm going to play a little clip in a second, but I want to show you the type of background work we do. Obviously, English is not my first language, but this is the type of work we do where we classify different things and we try to understand the value and to put a value and you know, a value to each object or each element or each decision in the world. And this is what creates a value system for us to, you know, in order to win the game or lose it or whatever. So everything in that game has this registered, you know, very deep Excel sheets where we try to give everything a value. And we also work with non-linear narrative, but also multiple choices narrative. So this is what we call a choose your own adventure type of game. And I won't get into the history of that, but this is the narrative that you get. So depending on each choice you do, these are all the different ways this game could end. So keep that in mind. And this is what we designed with the students. And I'll show you a video and then we'll play it together for a few minutes. But I'll show you first, and you want to keep track of what's happening in the game, what the question they're asking, and how these two are changing to the left. So it starts with you choose who you are. And then you answer these questions, and depending on what you answer, a building in the community gets redesigned with a new architectural proposal. And you can see on the left, the map and the game board get replaced. then you get another question and you answer it, and you can see the mini map in the game here gets replaced. And then you're going to see here that the game board gets a new piece, and then the model 2 gets an addition. And every different choice, every different answer you give is going to give you a completely different design. So for example, what we're looking at is an inline insert into the urban block. The person shows a water park, so you can see the result of the water park. And I feel like, Caco, you might have been at one of these finals for that project. And that's when you won. So it's telling you, you won, this is what you changed in the neighborhood. And it depends along the elevation. So you can see all of the new buildings you added. And that leaves it so we can have just all the students' credits. Okay, this is a random window in Chrome, so it's not my history, just so you know. But we can play it here. So even if you go on my website, you're going to be able to play that. And I'm going to have Caco play with me. So Caco, you have to choose who do you want to be?
Okay, perfect. I'll be a resident of the block.
Okay. We would like to get to know you better as one of the residents living in this neighborhood. Do you want to have children?
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, do you want or have children? The back alley is currently used for vehicular transportation and trash collection, and it's not safe for residents' children to play in. On this block, I want my child to be able to, choice 1, play with other children and residents, choice 2, learn about and get closer to nature.
Let's say learn about and get closer to nature.
Okay. So now you did your choice, and we see a wildlife center is built in the back alley, and the existing vet building is renovated to become a wildlife hospital for rehabilitating injured urban wildlife, including birds, raccoon, opossum. The wildlife center becomes a popular place for families to bring their children and learn about urban nature and habitat. So you can see that the new building got put here with an 8-bit graphics, and you can see that it's also added on this minimap. And now we're gonna get a walkthrough of the space. So all of that is designed within our studio, and students get to experience like the different decisions you do as a neighborhood, as a community, with legal representation, architects and planners, how it influences not only the urban block, but the residents of the block. In this case, because you're playing a residence. More families with children decide to move into the block community decides to build a recreational facility. Would you want a place where your children can exercise, can learn how to swim, or can play with other kids?
Let's say a place where my children can play with other kids.
As a parent, I would like a therapeutical space within the community, a place for me to relax while my children are supervised, a place for me to have fun with my children.
Let's say a therapeutical space within the community.
A water park is built on the block and becomes a very popular place. You're doing the same answers as the example I showed. For family outings and play dates. So you can see it here, but you can also see it on this mini-map. And then you get the walkthrough, which we already did. Do you think the workload for young kids is too stressful for them? You can say yes, kids spend so much time on schoolwork and extracurricular activities this day, or no, kids are able to have a balanced childhood with school and play.
Let's say the first answer.
Do you want an after-school program, yes or no?
Yes.
Do you think the community is responsible for housing young educator?
Yes.
Yes. So additional housing built on the block provides affordable housing operation for local educators and teachers. Same thing, you see it here, you see it there. And you can go through all of these different gameplay. So I'm gonna skip. So we're done with your neighborhood. And we get the plan starts again. But of
Great.
course, sorry, last thing, if you go now on this board, you're able to see which answer you got, and you can read what's the score that you had by playing this game. Yeah, so that's a bit
That's
what I
fantastic,
do and
Yara.
what I teach.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. That was
Yeah,
great to
thank
see.
you.
So you're talking to people in Santa Monica to get that built right now, right?
Yeah, of course, to get the 16 different option builds.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that. I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Shuruq. She's a creative technical artist, 3D artist, and educator based between Los Angeles and Berlin. That's a type of bicoastal I want to be a part of, where she holds the lead art position at Clan Games. Her work is rooted in game engines and interactive media, creating speculative, beautiful, and sometimes provocative little worlds. Her practice delves into worlds through the eyes of the characters that inhabit them, offering unique perspectives. Growing, uh, growing up in multiple cultures, Shuruq invites exploration of these varied viewpoints. Her work ranges from representational storytelling and 3D character design to utilizing creative technologies. Sorry, I'm going to start that one over. Her work ranges from representational storytelling and 3D character design to utilizing creative technology tools to shape immersive worlds, environments, and spaces. Thank you for joining us, Shuruq. Excited to see your presentation. All right, take it away.
Thank you, Caco, for the nice introduction. Yara, what a exciting work. And I think we have a lot to talk about here and also outside. I will just share my screen. So the way that I'm going to structure today is just that I will show you all a little bit of my past experience. I call myself a creative technical artist and a 3D artist, and I'm just going to highlight what I have been working on. So I have a background in architecture, and I graduated in 2019 from SciArc, and since then I've been working as a 3D artist and technical artist on various interactive, mainly art projects, and I would like to highlight some of these today. I want to start with one of my own works, which is called Current Affairs. Current Affairs is an interactive VR installation, also similar maybe a bit to Yara's, that takes the viewer into the depths of the ocean, and the player is accompanied by an octopus, which is a non-human character that leads the player through this world and ultimately reaches the so-called plastic island. They are highlighting what that is and what all of these assimilated objects, almost like an archive, mean. I worked with real-time data that gets fed into this environment so that every time you press play, there are slight variations in environment and the atmosphere. And I'm very interested in how and who tells a story, or how the narrative unfolds, be it in a linear or a non-linear way. So one of my early projects was choreographic camouflage, directed by Liam Young, and this is a music film that was performed together with a dance studio, Jacob Jonas Company in Los Angeles. And the theme of this was that there are specific dancers that hack through a network of super surveillance, and they design special dance movements that hack through the skeleton detection algorithm, which is one of the surveillance mechanisms used in the speculative world. And my job as a creative technical artist here was really to do a lot of R&D, figuring out how the narrative can be displayed and represented. So I used the skeleton detection algorithm called PoseNet, which we kind of hacked and deployed from its original function so that the dancers and the characters become invisible to the eye of the machine. The next work, which I would like to highlight, is a real-time animation done in Unity called Life After Bob, the Chalice Study. This is directed by Ian Cheng. It is deployed from one of his early sketches of a future world where AI and human life merge. And this was a huge production. We were 80 people in the end. My role was I started here as a 3D modeler, and then I ended as a production designer slash lead Unity artist. And I was really hands-on here from concept to final pixel. The story plays in the near future. It was actually a really massive world building challenge because every single piece in this world is designed by hand. We didn't use any found assets or bought assets. So this was a really special production, I think, especially now looking back at it, because this was one of my earliest things that I worked on. And every single prop was customized and designed for this world. So I worked very closely in the beginning with the concept artists, where I took their 2D sketches and made the 3D assets out of them. But then so I started from small and then enlarged. So then I started doing interiors of the apartments, and I started doing exteriors of the city. And obviously I worked very closely with Ian and yeah, the art team. But really I was or we were customizing all these different scenes. One of my favorite world or little environment is this Kiki's protein shuttle, which is this speculative way of consuming new kinds of food. And there was a lot of back and forth between the actual environment, but then also how environments merge and how you can make it more coherent. So then the final design was this shuttle here. But also as a lead Unity artist, my role was to implement it into Unity and see how it fits with all the VFX and making sure the animations are correct. Here I'm showing another small environment of another shuttle. And this is also on YouTube, so it's all available to watch. One of the big challenge was, like, in the speculative world, was how do you design spaces that actually don't exist? So these are the wavy verses. The wavy verses are a representation of a space where you connect with the AI. or with an AI to keep it very broad and not spoil anything from the story. So how could that space that first of all doesn't exist, but also that conveys a certain mood of the character, how do you design an R&D that with such a big team? So here we have from concept art to narrative storyboarding, and then in sketches and my implementations, and also 3D sketches. In this slide, I would like to show another like workflow of a larger environment. We put a lot of effort into making the world coherent and really achieving a soft look of the vegetation and the grass. So up here you can see the back and forth and really the close work between the team, and then how it looks in one of the light environment, in one of the light scenes. Part of this environmental props is also the grass. The grass is super important, which took a long time. But then it also went to more, I guess, creative tech things like figuring out how to use VFX and VFX pipelines, and then implementing them also in the animation. One big challenge here was so the movie is 48 minutes long. The story was much longer that Ian wrote, so it had to be shortened. So we did a lot of environmental storytelling, hiding Easter eggs in the actual film. And this is a scene where you see the main character trying to redefine her own identity. So the viewer actually knows as much or as little as the main character, and through the environmental props and the background information, the viewer kind of pieces together a narrative of the character. So the viewer becomes almost like an archaeologist, playing out their own narrative. So there was the interactive animation, and then there was also the world watching mode in which viewers were able to navigate through this. Basically, this is a linear narrative, so they were able to navigate through this sequence and pause and review assets. And also each asset is hooked to a wiki page where viewers could add and modify the meaning and the properties of the assets. So it became a really massive communal world building project, basically. Skipping to the next, I just want to touch upon each of these projects and showing my role in them. So this is Commonhood. Commonhood is a community building game designed by Plethora Projects. Here, my role as the lead artist was really, because especially was such a small studio, all of us wore a lot of different hats, but my role was to go again, like through the props, prop production, environments, lighting, and characters. I will skip this I will skip the trailer here. Speaking of world building or digital environments, and then in a game scenario, how do you navigate the player through the game, and what tricks and ways are there to lead a player through that game? So this is what is called level design, and there are different techniques that use lighting and color to navigate the player through this huge map. Characters were big asset production because you got to play different characters. So each character also had their own backstory, and that was then told through their own spaces. So each character had their own space, and that is how their characteristics basically are defined. Moving on, I want to briefly highlight Variants, which is a project by Shuruq. Caco and I worked on this together a bit. And this is a real-time simulation that merges physical and virtual environments together. That is the idea. So this is in Norway. There's a big screen in the forest, and there are sensors in the forest. The screen on the forest shows the same environment that the screen is situated in. So it's a replica of the physical world, and physical and digital communicate with each other and influence one another. So there was inside the virtual is the intelligent camera that navigates through the space. And then there are also the intelligent mutations that are either grow or die depending on the physical environment, which is captured through 3D, through data censoring coming real time in from the forest. This is a project, a mini project that I've been working on for Xsola. It's nothing fancy or does not look good. I just wanted to put it in to expand, because the most previous stuff was really my role as a creative tech and 3D art was on environments and atmospheres and props and like world building in a very physical sense. And this was my first project working with characters. And the goal here was to create this interactive character that kind of you can interact with and communicate with. It was really challenging. Anything with characters is super challenging, but we use different pace animations and live links that you can communicate with and directly influence the character. And also different ways of capturing full body animations, bringing the character alive. Liminal is another project by Shuruq. It's a character simulation, which was produced in Unreal. It actually the first version just got released or shown at the Art Biennale in Venice this year. And I can't show more images of this for NDA purposes, but this was a huge, also another massive project. One of the main challenges here, or also the main differences here that you can see are the visuals and aesthetics. This is super high res and photoreal. And so there are a lot of like other challenges in this work that expand just the typical challenge of making something interactive or dynamic. And I am now in Berlin, working as the lead 3D artist in a game company called Clan Games. We're developing a game a large MMO simulation called Seed. Seed is an adventure game that takes the player onto a new planet where the player grows the seedlings and grows different communities and societies, collaborating with each other and interacting with other players. And with all of my experience that I've highlighted before, I think so this is a massive game. There are 150 people working on it, and I think all of my kind of skills that I've now briefly touched upon come together here, where you really have to take a lot of things into consideration while working on non-linear or dynamic works. And I think that is where Yara and I have a lot to talk about because I think I will open up the podium now, the floor.
Thanks for that, Shuruq. It's fantastic to see the breadth of your work too. I remember both the Ian Chang project and the Pierre Huy Wung fondly. Our moderator today is Matt Conway. He's a computational designer and architect, also game maker as well. Excited to have you join the talk and moderate the conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was, super inspiring. I like both of y'all's work. Another shout out to Life of Bob. If you haven't seen it, it's free on YouTube. Go watch it. It is one of the most provocative things I've seen in a long time. So definitely do that. I want to get to this dynamic works conversation, but first, because I know there's a lot of students on here, I was hoping both of you come from like very technical architectural backgrounds, which I find interesting. And so before we jump into that, could you both talk about like the first time you made this pivot? Like what caused that into like this sort of like using game engines as a tool from that architectural background? Because I think that's really helpful for the students that are listening and maybe other people too.
Shall I go, Yara? Yeah, Yara and I were in the same, or I will answer for myself. I think architecture, or the way that I studied architecture, I did my undergrad in Vienna at the Technical University, so it was super rigorous, super straightforward, very, very kind of in a very linear way. And what game engines especially allow is to break this rigorosity and this strictness of architecture. It breaks it a bit up, where it can really play with stuff, and you can have unexpected results. And I think in my course of my studies, once I got my hands on Unity and explored this as a tool to create unexpected results, I saw that as a thing that I want to explore, just because there's so much freedom in there, and it's so much more fun when things are loose and free and unexpected, and you have to change path, and there's no clear, kind of not a linear, like almost narrative. So that is what brought me to really want to explore dynamic and interactive pipelines.
Yeah, I think pretty similarly to you. Like I come from a very traditional, like 7-year engineering architecture background in Beirut, where you basically end up as a licensed architect. So, and I built buildings for a few years before I decided to get another degree outside of Lebanon because the scope of the place I was in at that time wasn't very technological. I think the most technology we had was a new 3D printer. in the country. So I landed in a weird, random, maybe the best happy accident in a school in Germany, where they just got a new VR headset, and it was in this strange room nobody was using, and my partner and we were like, what is this thing? And it was such a cool structure because it was more like a residency. You could do whatever you wanted. So we went to this room and we're like trying to experiment, and it was the first time I tried a VR headset on, and I found that the fact that you can interact in real time, that you can get all of these digital, reactions, and you can see all of these world was like a mind-opening moment for me. I was like, oh my God, forget everything I did before. Like, this is what I want to do. And then I just became obsessed with my partner with extended reality. And this is also where I met Shuruq, because she was also a student in that program. And yeah, I think it was really, for me, I don't know what you would say, but it was really that black room where we got this VR headset, and I remember with my partner Vivian like drilling into the wall the sensors so we could use it, and it was so exciting. And I think it's since that point I was like, oh, this is the world I want to be in, and this is where Unity came in, and this is where interest in digital assets and interaction, immersive spaces, coding, all of that world building narrative.
I also think that in a game engine, I remember when I first had Unity, and oh my God, my scene was so heavy that it didn't even load properly. But it was so cool because you can basically merge everything together. Like, I just like, and it was like super dirty, but I had like scans, not even like clean scans, but scans coming raw from the scanning software with found 3D assets from online with different like sounds. And then I was experimenting with cameras and kept on overriding my my camera sequence, not understanding how everything actually in engine is like super connected.
That's hilarious, actually. Sure. Like, I agree so much when I think back on like how we used it first, and now like how I use it, how we both probably use it now. Like now when I teach my students like how to do the perfect low poly like modeling in Blender, how to perfectly before it was really like an artist, I think, working in this medium, and now it's really much like a professional, because when you work in interactive media and game, like there's no space for wasting, energy on anything and everything.
Yeah, because also it's so like it's really challenging, I think, working on things that are like not in this linear path, and where especially when you have a viewer or a player that can interact, like it has to be, you have to like go through a process that you just explained.
Yeah. And this is really like a learning curve. Like this is really not where we start, where I imagine if someone goes into, game design, or this is really where you start, like how to properly do things. So I feel like there's a lot we learn from coming from like a digital architect, designing spaces, to going into this. I think there's all that wealth of knowledge from these other disciplines that we bring into, game design and interactive virtual environment.
Yeah, totally. I also, sorry, I don't want to like take over, but I do realize like now working in all these different teams, and now in this company here in Berlin, it's my first time in more like an industry standard, but I do really see the difference in like people who are educated as a like game designer or like level industry level game world versus architects. And I think that I personally am so proud of having this architecture background, because basically the main thing that it taught me is how to figure out stuff on my own and how to like Google and find things, find answers to things. And I think this really also comes from the architecture background of, where so many, as an architect, you have to consider so many different things. It's not only about the design or the functionality or the aesthetics, but there's so much coming together. And I think that's just
Yeah, and I think it makes, a lot of sense with these spaces because designing architecture is designing like how you would walk into a building, or when you walk in a city, how does it, how does a building look? How do you plan a city? How when you go to different cities in the world, it feels totally different because of the architecture. And I feel all of that like goes so well with word building, and also how you walk through a building, how do you experience space? And these are all the things that we're taught in architecture. So this is also, what I try to tell my students is like,
Yeah.
there's so much that bleeds from like an architecture education into all of these other disciplines. As we know, in LA, so many architects work in the film industry, in animation, in all of these different worlds, because that spatial knowledge is something that really makes you think a bit differently, like outside of the box. But yeah.
I like that word. I'm glad both of y'all answered to like what your backgrounds in architecture bring, because I think that's super unique and is why you're both in the position you are. I'm curious if you've seen it bleed. Yara, you said bleed, like your architecture bleeds into this world. I'm curious if you've seen, whether through your own work or some of your like your students' works, or if you've seen it bleed the other way, like this going back into the world of more traditional architecture.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's something I always think about, like as being an academic and within an architecture department. I always think about how these techniques that I teach my students can bleed back into their studio, into their thinking. And I think, for example, for the Santa Monica project, this is a really great tool for, discussion about urban planning, or like how to constellate different participants into into a tool that's interactive, playful, but also gets you some results. And the other one that I showed, and this is why I showed these two projects, because the other one is how do you overlay digital content that is interactive in real time over physical content? And as architects, like I'm not using any new tools. We do models. We just call them models. I call them game boards. And we design spaces and how you walk through them, and we design interactions. So it's just a way of like how to use things that work, that are interactive and engage an audience, and how to bring that into architecture to engage audiences. That may be getting feedback from the community that you're building in. It may be in so many different ways. But it used to be used for performance, how to make the design better, I mean, that you're a grasshopper hero. But I think there's other ways that don't have to do with performance or efficiency, but have to do with engagement and participation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you both mentioned participation or interaction, right? And like that was both of you said that was like kind of a break from architecture for you, like why this type of stuff was important. And I'm curious what your audience gets from that type of interaction, that type of nonlinearity in this type of world versus like a more, again, like just the architectural model, versus the game board. And I think, Yara, your axonometric query, I remember during that review, we're like, oh, actually exploring the space. And so I'm curious if there's been other, because both of you still, your work is situated like spatially, like for the most part, right? Things were like, just like they're presented in certain places in certain ways. It's not just via a screen. There's a lot more going on. So I'm curious what your audience has gotten through back from that interaction. Maybe they didn't talk to you.
I think that, well, I think it's architecture, or also it could also be, well, I don't know. I'm a bit far from like traditional architecture, but what I would intuitively say the main difference is that the audience in a case of something dynamic and interactive is really kind of hands-on and really immersed in a way that exceeds just the visuals, but really immersed in a way that your behavior or your prompt, your meaning the audience's prompts or the audience's behavior can influence the world that you look at. And I think that adds a new layer of immersiveness, and yeah, being part of something.
Yeah. I think I agree with you. I think agency, like that the participants and the players have agency in their decision and the way you experience, like, for example, in the Santa Monica game, the way you experience it is really depending on what Caco answered, right? But if you go back and you try it on the website and you answer differently, you might be the CEO of a corporate development that just wants to build and doesn't care about community, and the game is going to be very different. So I think there's agency that you get to craft your own experience, and that's something that in our culture today is really important, through the way we use social media and everything is like, independently crafted. But what I also say is like, we're not, I think, I don't know, we'll have drinks and discuss it, Shuruq, but like, I think that I'm not trying to say that this is the future or this is what people should do. I'm saying like, this is what interests me and this is what I think cool. I think architecture is cool too. I just think that this is what I want to do. So it's really not like what is better or does it add or what does it lose, but more like what are you interested in? And just know that there's all of these different paths and ways and, untraditional path that Shuruq and I, for example, have that, you can get into. And it's a lot about teaching yourself and doing the YouTube Udemy, teaching yourself and getting better in the things you want to and getting agency over your own life and your own interests.
Yeah.
Speaking of agency, Caco described this format as like a house party where we can kind of be more candid. And so I'm going to like bluntly pretend like, oh, we just all met at a house party. What would be a project you two could collaborate on? And the two C games made me think of this, right? Like you're in such a similar space. I'm surprised you haven't collaborated on a project. So I'm curious what that project would be.
I don't know. We could collaborate on something where we scan different spaces and then you interact in my space and I interact in your space.
Yeah, I feel like there's so much, I think there's so much potential. Like when you were presenting, I was looking at the work and I'm like, this is so great. Like it's such good, interesting work and such technical, precision and things that, I admire so much. So I think there's, maybe next time we talk, we'll be talking about what we're developing together. But I think
here's hoping.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I always think collaboration is really interesting. I know that we all have super busy life. I know with Caco, sometimes we sneak out for a coffee and discuss our future plotting of what we want to design.
So many schemes.
So many schemes. So there's, so much interest. But as we know, life is busy but I really hope we get to collaborate. And I think it's going to be pretty awesome.
I think that'd be so cool, actually. I was thinking that before, Matt, you asked the question. I was like, it'd be kind of cool if you and I worked on something small together. But I don't know. I'm so excited. Like personally, I get very excited about like I don't know. I'm really hands-on, and I get really excited about not only new tools, etc., but just making something look good. And then there's really like not so much time, and I feel so.
Yeah.
Right, you know what I mean? Like you can't do everything.
I know so much what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I would love to, since this is the party we hang out in, I would love to show you in a few months once I get it further than where it is. But like what we've been working on, I'm so excited. It's been like 8-9 months we've been working on it. We still have like 2 years ahead. Maybe that's the thing it has in common with architecture, is that the timeline are way longer than an artwork. Like it takes time and it takes a full team. But there's all of these different phases that of course we've learned about, and all of these different ways of designing that are different than architecture, but also you learn so much from the architecture background and how you mix with all of these other mediums.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's super cool. I'd love to see more of that.
Me too. Add us all to that game. I want to play.
Right?
It sounds fun. I wanted to open it up to some of the audience questions real quick.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing and being so candid about your work, your process. It's really nice to hear your perspectives. So someone from the audience is asking about precedents and case studies because you both work using like space architecture, but also interaction in video games. It's like when you're doing something that's so like cutting edge, like how do you find precedents for this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I can start if you want. I feel like precedents are important, references. It's maybe the first thing I do is like research and find things that are similar to what I want to do, similar in mood, similar in game mechanics, similar in different aspects, but you always need like whatever you're gonna do is never gonna be really novel. There's all of these people that have incredible ideas. There's all of these people on earth that are so smart and thus do such good board games, video games, architecture. There's such good work out there, and there's so much to look at and learn from. So I feel like it's about you, how you translate it from one medium to the other. And because our background is architecture, I tend a lot of times, for example, in this platformer games where students were animating a platformer on an architectural section. So for example, the group that worked with Zaha Hadid looked at her building precedent, her section, how she draws that, and then, designed their own version of that. So I guess each project, but in any case, in every project, you always need good references, and to do that, start research where you understand what you're getting into and who did it before and what cool people are, talking about around the subject and all of that.
Yeah. I think really important, I don't know if that's such a precedent, not president, is that you are not like the sharing knowledge, sharing ideas, talking, being open, and not protecting your thoughts and ideas. I think that it's really important, not necessarily like collaborating immediately, but just like kind of collaborating your idea or sharing your idea, rather than guarding it. And
Yeah. I feel like when you're a student, maybe you feel you need to guard stuff. And when you go in the real world, you're like, it only gets better when you share it and you get feedback. And yeah.
Yeah, that's really like I feel like that sharing aspect is really important, especially when you're doing stuff that's like super novel, so you get feedback from people that are like interacting with your work. So another question is when making these new types of experiences, how much of it is doing and how much is learning?
I think learning is always a big thing. I think not only like learning new tools and new pipelines, but learning to change path, because when you like set milestones and you want to finish a small like milestone, there are always, or in most cases, going to be some issues or bugs. Really, bugs is a big thing that just come up unexpectedly. So I think it's really a bigger part than learning. I think is learning or being okay with derouting and including that time, because then you have to learn something which you don't even know you had to learn before you started. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
when you
love
said
that.
bugs, everybody started nodding. Like, yep, that's a lot of bugs.
I love the learning things you didn't know you had to learn. Like you always end up in territories you had no idea either existed or that you would have to go there. Or so I think it's very like flexibility and yeah, and just being okay with the unknown and changing plans and yeah.
Like kind of being the same way your work is interactive, you have to also always stay interactive and dynamic.
Yeah, so true. Get up from your desk a little every once in a while. Um, stretch it out. This question's for Yara, but I want to open it up to Shuruq as well. They're asking about so you have a very specific like style and color palette in like the work that you show. The question is around like where does that come from? How do you find inspiration and like what type of I guess this tacks on to the precedent question as well. It's like, how do you find stuff? Maybe not necessarily spatial, but it's inherently um, visual, like the work that both of y'all do. Is like, how do you find those types of inspirations?
Yeah, I'm curious actually what Shuruq had to say, but I can answer quickly. I think it's in research, like every project, like if I compare the project of the deep sea mining, it really deals with the color of that world. So it's the research and the world building leak into the aesthetic of how it looks. So it's really representing that world. So it comes from research and it comes like the new game we're working on is an ancient era of the Phoenicians, and it really deals with how it was back then, the color greens, the color of the earth, the color of the purple, all of these, the color of spices. It's like these things that are that come from research. And then, of course, there's an adjustment so that the color palette, goes together. This is why I'm a creative director, because this is what I deal with, like aesthetics and how the things come together and look good. And I think it comes from a lot of training and a lot of looking at I think my trick for it is, honestly, I don't know if it works, but this is what I usually do is I look at paintings or artworks or things that inspire me, and I try to nail down their colors in the minimum amount of colors I can. So I try to replicate their palette in something very small. And this is what I tell my students, like, what's your favorite drawing, picture, image, whatever, and get it down to the 5 colors that are together and that actually correlate and would do, and then use only these and try it. Like try to resist the temptation of adding other things. And yeah, and then fog gradient. I think it depends on the project, really, on the research. With
Yeah,
Matt, we had a joke that like with Matt and Laura Michelin, we had a joke that add fog and everything will look better.
it's true that depth of field.
But there was another joke when I was teaching in Germany. The professor I was with, a very dear professor of mine called Johann Bettem, he was really excellent. And he made a joke when I was teaching to the students. He was telling them, like, you know what, you just need to add pink in your projects and Yara will love it. So yeah. But I'm not sure, like I'm sure because you've worked with so many interesting directors and different visions, and maybe you want to talk about how they came up with the color palettes or how these things were decided, because I think also all of these worlds are so coherent aesthetically.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really interesting what you said about depicting an existing image and narrowing it down to a small amount of like properties. I think that's a really cool trick, which I never thought about. I personally I mean, everyone does, I think, but I try to like really define what I personally like. And I actually now have this Google Doc where I have like concept art, 3D art, fine art, film, like all of these different categories, and just add my favorite people and my favorite works in there. So I think like defining your own library, like an art Bible or a Bible of stuff you love, I think that is
like your own precedents, your own
yeah.
research, and your own interests.
You
Yeah.
build your own taste.
Yeah.
Y'all both have pretty good taste.
You do, Caco.
Hey, well, that's why I invited y'all. So,
But I think taste is also something you can learn. It's also something you
Yeah.
can understand what colors go together, and
yeah,
So-
like kind of cooking, and what kind of ingredients do you want to use?
Yeah, you stop
I
measuring
wish
stuff. You're just like a little of this, a little of that.
I wish it translated into cooking.
It would actually be cool. This could be a cool brief for like in a student context where you have like ingredients, and ingredients are like 5 colors, 2 different shapes, 3 different animations. That'd
Well,
be
there's
cool.
that Japanese way of like prepare of plating dishes where like the food has to
Yeah.
be there's like 5 colors and then that's it. You got your white, your black, and then three different ones.
Yeah.
That's why it always looks so beautiful. Minimal, simplify. So
Yeah,
there's
it
another
gets harder
question. Go ahead.
it gets harder when you move away from minimalism. When you go into
Yeah.
excessive and exuberance, it gets
Yeah.
harder, but it also gets better. No, it's beautiful.
It's fun, a little maximalist. There's a question about it being interdisciplinary. Both of y'all work with like large teams, and the question is around is saying it's like, do you find benefit from having an architectural background in what you're doing now? Considering the people that you work with as well, like, is there anything that has been like surprisingly beneficial? Like, oh, I wish that this is something that more architect like kind of like taking information from one place and putting it somewhere else is like, is there something that would be beneficial for more architects or people doing the type of things that you do to be aware of or know?
Yeah, maybe I answer really quickly. I think as an architect, we because Yara and I both have a background in architecture, I think we're like really versatile and are trained to think with other people and collaborate with other people. And I think this is a super beneficial aspect of working in this interdisciplinary field where right now, I think also because technology is changing and like
Mhm.
what I wanted to highlight in my own work was like this role from a 3D modeler to something more lead, like all of these aspects you have to take into account, but also the different people, because it's all like group work. Nothing is just a one-man show. So I think it's like a communication and collaboration, but then also I think as an architect being able to tie things like different things together and making practical, like being really practical about things. Practical then in a context like this, meaning efficiency and what's the other word? And efficiency and an efficient pipeline that doesn't only work for you as a solo worker, but works in a team. I think that we are trained as architects to do that well.
Yeah, I think I agree, and I would say, working with my practice, Folly Feast, is already a collaboration, so we co-create, right? I'm the creative director, and Vivian is our creative technologist and technology lead, and it's already a collaboration because we speak different languages. Even if, happily enough, she comes from an architecture background, she has nothing to do with architecture, and her work is extremely technical and only exists in lines of scripts, and what I do is only aesthetical, so kind of coming together and having discussion, but also when we collaborate with other people, like trusting in their expertise.
Yeah.
And really listening and being patient and understanding others' needs and incorporating that and being able to change because what you thought you wanted to do actually doesn't really work, or what they want to do is not really what you want. So being able to truly collaborate and trust the expertise of other people, and your work will only get better from that. Yeah.
Well said. Well, we're at the end. I'd like this conversation to go on forever because y'all are both amazing people. I always learn so much. And thanks, Matt, for moderating the talk. But we've come to that point in the evening where thank you both for here. I'm just going to give you a bunch of these. Thank you for for joining us and for sharing your work and your insight. It goes a long way to like see what you do, and it's so amazing, and it's like always come away from seeing this type of work super inspired and like I'm ready to sign off and like start making stuff right now. So thanks again, and to everybody watching now on the stream or in the future, check us out next time. We'll be back next week, so
Thank you
see you
so
later.
much.
Thank you
Right.
so much.